So today we're headed down to the Renaissance Hotel in downtown Nashville because I've been invited to speak at Investor Fuel, which is a mastermind that goes across the country, and they just so happen to be here. I'm going to be talking about commercial real estate as an alternative investment, really hammering the point on how to transition into commercial real estate from multifamily investments. There's not a lot of education out there on how to get started in commercial real estate investing, so I wanted y'all to tag along to check it out. I think it's going to be a really good talk for anybody that's in that transition phase. This is Nashville's subway system. Hey, how's it going? Good to meet you. Yeah, doing great. How are you? Of course, happy to do it.
With that being said, I'd like to welcome Tyler Cobble to the stage.
Appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Grew up myself. Welcome to Nashville, y'all. Yeah. Just so I get to know everybody in here a little bit first before we kind of dive into things, who owns a bunch of single family? Couple of y'all. Who owns multifamily? More of y'all. Who owns commercial real estate? Okay, cool. About a handful of y'all. So appreciate what Greg was saying earlier about the opportunity with where we are right now, because we focus on the alternative asset class, right? Real estate is already an alternative investment, and commercial real estate within that is a little bit more, I guess, alternative, you could say. I don't think it is because I've been in it for 10 years. It seems to me like the investment class, but we can talk about that a little bit more today. A bit more about myself. I got started in commercial real estate back in 2013, dropped out of college and got a job offer from a developer that I had worked for over a summer, and he paid for me to get my commercial real estate license, and I worked on leasing his portfolio of real estate assets. So we had a 550,000 square foot shopping center, a 60,000 square foot office building, and a couple 100,000 square feet of industrial. Put my first deal together in 2016, which was a 42 unit townhome development that we did ground up about 15 minutes southwest of here, and left in 2018, started my own firm. And so I've got the Cobble Group, which is our commercial real estate brokerage. We do mostly investment transactions on that side now. We've been very fortunate. I started a YouTube channel back in the pandemic in 2020, and so now we have investors from all over the country that we represent. Started a commercial property management company 6 months after that, which you'd think would be a really weird time to be starting a development company considering everything that was going on with the pandemic, but very much like what the situation is today, it's actually the ideal time to be starting anything like that. I think that we're in probably the best opportunity to buy that we've been in since 2008, because when everybody starts getting afraid and they start backing away, they start selling their properties at a discount. And as we all know, over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, real estate just goes up in value. If it starts coming down, we've got bigger problems, right? For the long term, at least. We want it to come down for the short term. So I'm pretty excited of where we're headed now, because everything has just gotten so damn expensive. Who's feeling that? You know, I mean, every deal you look at, you're like, man, this is going for a 4.5 cap rate. How's that even, that doesn't even make sense. I actually started telling clients 5 years ago to stop buying multifamily, because when we first got started back in 2013, you could buy pretty decent Class C, Class B apartment complexes for like a 7 or 8 cap. And it was around 2018 we started seeing them going below 6, and I just didn't see the value out of it for the amount of work and risk that you had to take doing those projects. And so we've always focused on alternative investments within real estate, which is office, retail, industrial, hospitality, and mixed use. So I'll tell you a little bit about the projects that we've done. One of our more popular ones is probably the smallest deal I've ever done. It was a 6-bay car wash. Who's doing car washes? There you go. I didn't keep it as a car wash, though I have actually been looking at a few car wash investments, so I might want to pick your brain later. We converted it into 5 micro restaurants and a bar. So we kept the original structure, and each restaurant is 400 square feet. That includes the walk-in cooler. They are very small. But we turned the drive aisle into outdoor seating, covered seating for the groups. So it was a very COVID responsive deal to where the inside of the restaurant is it's a to-go window, is basically what it is. And so it's been a lot of fun doing that. They are inherently more affordable because they are smaller, but they are very high price per square foot. So it works as an investment. So we're getting probably $120 or $130 a foot for those spaces. To put that in perspective, your restaurants in that area are going for about $25 to $30 a foot. But it's because the size is so much smaller, we decided to think a little bit outside of the box. And that's what I enjoy about the commercial real estate side of things. You can get creative, you can get different with it. In multifamily, there's only so many different things that you can do, right? It's like, okay, are we changing the countertops or are we painting the cabinets this week? We also bought a tower in downtown Chattanooga back in January of 21. Again, the height when everybody was really afraid. I think we absolutely stole it. It was completely vacant. It was about 41,000 feet. We paid $1.8 million for it. And we sold it, I guess technically in September, but we seller financed it for them, which we could also talk about because I love seller financing my own deals. We sold it for $4.6 million in about 18 months. And that's an opportunity you won't find in multifamily either, right? I mean, how many vacant apartment complexes are out there that aren't vacant for a very big reason? Not many. And now most of what we're doing is we do heavy value add. So we're under construction on a boutique hotel here in Nashville right now, 48 rooms. We're under contract on another 79 room boutique hotel. And we've got a project in Chattanooga that's about 1.5 million square feet that we are doing an adaptive reuse project on. We've got over 1 million square feet vacant there, but we bought it cash flowing. And I'm also master planning a 32 acre site up in Madison, probably not even 20 minutes from here, for 1,100 apartment units, 300,000 square feet of office space, and some ground floor retail. So my experience on the commercial side runs the gamut from really small 6-bay car wash all the way up to millions of square feet of development. And that's where I kind of wanted to introduce you guys to a little bit of what we're doing and then talking about the opportunity that we're in right now. Who here thinks that commercial is more complicated or scarier than single family or multifamily? Raise your hand. Yeah, I mean, there's a fair amount in here, right? And that's a lot of the feedback that I get.
It's just too also that I don't think no one understands it, right? I feel like what I don't understand, then I don't understand the risk or how to perceive what value is.
That's exactly it. A lot of people just don't know that, right? Because most of us grew up in homes or apartments. We lived in apartments during college. We all have had that experience before, so it's very relative to us. We understand how that asset class works. And it's funny, I didn't understand how commercial real estate worked until I got a job in it. I didn't realize oh yeah, somebody represented Chipotle and put them in there. I thought that they just kind of popped up one day and we're like, yeah, this is where we're going. But it's, if you can underwrite a multifamily deal, commercial real estate is way easier. It is so much easier. I've underwritten a few multifamily deals in my day, not many, but man, going through those rent rolls, especially if you're buying something bigger, right? 50, 100, 150 units, you're going through a lot of numbers and you've got a lot of things that you have to take into account when you're doing that underwriting. Whereas in commercial real estate, you could buy something similar that has 9 leases on it. They're all triple net, which means that the tenants are paying for their pro rata share of the common area maintenance, property taxes, and building insurance. So you don't have to worry if the property taxes go up next year, how that's going to hit your NOI. So it's a lot easier to actually underwrite these deals. The thing that really gets people, though, is they don't understand how that works. And it's really not that complicated, but what I found, and this was frustrating for me when I first started off in commercial real estate, is that there were 2 podcasts back in 2013 that actually talked about commercial real estate. I listened to, they had stopped running like 2 years before. So ran out of that, read every book that I could on Amazon, and there were 0 YouTube channels. The problem is that commercial real estate is not like single family or multifamily whatsoever, right? I mean, everybody in here wants to help each other and give back and do this, that, and the other to make sure that everybody has successful deals. But commercial real estate's like shrouded in this mystery and this no, I'm going to keep it for myself. I'm not going to tell anybody how this works because they don't want to create the competition. But going into this market where we're headed right now, where multifamily cap rates have compressed so much and debt's harder to get, there's value to be made in commercial real estate. So a lot of what I'm doing now is talking to multifamily investors and showing them how to do commercial real estate investments because you can buy properties at a 7, 8, 9% cap rate right now. And they're not as high risk as people think that they are. Maybe there's some vacancy, maybe there's a tenant turning over, but you just have to look at the fundamentals of the market and understand who is moving in that market, who's going to be signing leases, and bet on that, right? You've got a lot of tenants that are doing very well right now, right? Tenants are doing just fine. You know, on the property management side, our properties are probably over 95% occupied, which is pretty great to have, and a lot of those are 3 to 5 year leases. So we sign it today, I don't have to worry about it for 4 years, right? I don't have to worry about a whole bunch of students signing a lease in June of this year and then 30 leases coming due next year, right? It's taken care of for a while, and it's nice because it's staggered out. So I wanted to kind of preface all of that, my experience, where the market is, how there is opportunity in commercial compared to multifamily. And then since we're in kind of a smaller room, I want to open it up for questions and dive into what y'all want to talk about on the commercial real estate side. We can talk about leases, we can talk about lending. It's very similar to the multifamily market right now. But the people that are getting deals done are going to be the ones that in 2 years have 100% occupied buildings because nobody else is building right now.
When you say commercial buildings, so I think of like this a strip mall, kind of like, or like an office building, office condo, right? I mean, we bought our own. This is my only experience in this whole thing. I was renting, right? I had a signed lease, and then the site went vacant, and I was like, oh, this guy may, you know, and I realized that the site that I was in was vacant for a long time as well. So I was like, maybe I'll reach out to the seller and see if he's interested in selling, right? Or that he sold it to me, or rented it to me. Of course, he wanted to sell it, right? Because he was just frustrated.
Tired of dealing with it.
But it's funny is because all I did was talk to the broker that got me in. He's like, dude, I can feel this, no problem. And so by the time we actually went under contract and closed, he'd already found my next tenant.
Yep.
And they signed a 5-year lease. And the truth is, like, this money shows up. Like, Clear Counseling sends us a check every month.
She signed a 10-year? She signed a 10-year.
Yeah, with a 3% escalation clause every year.
Yep.
Maybe that's not the right thing to do, signing a 10-year lease, but, I think we did 2 5-years. She has an extension.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your investment strategy, right? I mean, if you're a full-time commercial real estate investor, I would say, no, go for a 3 to 5 year lease because in 3 to 5 years, rents might be higher. But if you're just wanting to make sure that the mortgage is covered and the property value is going to increase over time, 10-year deals are great. Like, I love them. The great thing about commercial real estate leases is I can ask for your mother's maiden name and her blood type. I don't have to worry about fair housing. I can go as deep into your background as I want to. I can ask for 12 months of bank statements, your personal tax returns, your personal financial statement that is certified by a CPA. And that's what I'll do if I'm doing a 10-year lease, because I need to know that if we're going to, pay a broker commissions on a 10-year lease, and I'm going to pay my attorneys to draft this, that you're going to be here for 10 years and pay me. And if you don't, you're personally guaranteeing the lease, so the only way for you to get out of these payments is by filing bankruptcy, which most people that own businesses are not willing to do because it's going to completely impact their future in a different way than what a residential tenant will, right? So that's one of the biggest benefits of it. Yeah, I mean, I can talk about several different deals that we've done. I mean, I actually love office right now. Yeah, go for it.
Now the box.
So one of the benefits of the commercial world is the triple net lease. Can you speak to when you apply that and the benefits of that?
Yeah, so in the apartment world, there's basically one standard lease, right? And there's a couple of different things that you can kind of change here and there, but you typically use the apartment association standard form, right? I mean, that's usually the easiest thing to do. In commercial real estate, every lease is catered to every building, right? No two leases are the same. And so that can be kind of frustrating for newcomers, but it's actually in your favor. You can have an attorney prepare it one time, and then as long as you have the fill in the blanks here, you're good to go. There's several different lease structures because of that. You've got a full service gross lease where it's very similar to multifamily, full services, where the tenant pays you one lump sum every month, and then, well, I guess they might be more modified gross, but let's talk about full service. They pay you one lump sum every month. The landlord then pays all of the expenses on the building and then keeps whatever's left over. The nice thing about that is that business owners, if they're not super sophisticated, they don't want to look at all these different numbers. They just want to say, okay, my rent's $3,000 a month, I pay you that and we're done. The downside is, as a landlord, if your property taxes go up, or if one of the biggest issues here in Nashville is ice, right? Like, we don't really prepare for that because it doesn't happen except for every 2 or 3 years. If you have to remove ice in the parking lots, that can get very expensive and your costs go up. You hadn't anticipated that before. So then you as the landlord have to pay for it. They have what's called a modified gross lease, which is where the tenant pays you a lump sum, but then maybe they pay their electric. right? So that's probably more appropriate for an apartment lease, right? Or maybe they'll pay their pro rata share of the property taxes. But the best lease, in my opinion, and we use this on just about every property that we have, is what's called a triple net lease. And it's where the tenant pays their pro rata share. So if they occupy 50% of the building, they're paying 50% of these expenses on the property, of the common area maintenance, which is everything from lighting in the hallways to maintenance of the bathrooms to cleaning everything, the property taxes, and the building insurance.
Above the HVAC as well, right?
Yes, yeah, HVAC can be included, and you can also actually charge, HVAC is 100% on the tenants. We typically have our tenants inspect the HVAC before because they're assuming 100% responsibility for it. Sometimes, we can get really into the throes of commercial real estate leases, and we can talk about all different negotiation strategies around that. But yes, tenants are typically responsible for the lease. And then you're talking about property taxes, right? Nashville just had their property taxes almost double here pretty recently, the past couple, 2-3 years. And, while the people that don't understand this go, yeah, people who own commercial real estate and all these skyrocketing values, they need to be paying their fair share. They don't understand that gets passed on directly to the business owners, which means it gets passed on directly to the consumers. But it's nice for me as a landlord, right? I don't have to worry about my property taxes doubling. I'm just like, hey, sorry guys, if y'all want to go lobby the city to get your property taxes lowered, you can do that. And then, of course, the building insurance, right? So this is not their liability insurance. Every business will carry their own liability insurance, but we have insurance on our properties, right? So the tenants pay their pro rata share of that as well. And so the great thing about a triple net lease is that since the tenants are typically handling everything, you can have a property management company run the property on your behalf because property management fees are actually paid through common area maintenance. So you can invest in these properties out of town, out of state, and not worry about how they're getting run because it's really up to the tenants to pay all of those bills. So that's, always think about David Green, like teaching everybody how to invest in single family out of state and how complicated that really is. With triple net investments, we just helped a client out of California buy a Take 5 oil in North Carolina that he'll never see. He never went and looked at it. I flew out there and looked at it on his behalf, took some pictures, of course, but we reviewed the lease. We looked at the tenant's financials, and we had the building inspected by a property inspector. He'll own that building for 10 years and probably never go see it. So talk about passive cash flow, right? Apartments, as great as they are, you still have to do a lot of work, right? You've got tenants that are gonna be calling your property manager Saturday night at 11 p.m., hey, toilet's broken or whatever, somebody's gotta come over and deal with that. These business owners will typically take care of all of that because they don't want to deal with it. They can't have customers coming in whenever there's an issue with the property. The HVAC goes out, they're having an HVAC tech come out and take care of it. So it's a pretty great setup for commercial real estate. That's one of the reasons we love it.
There still is much upside, so let's talk about the upside. So that's where I think that's maybe my disconnect sometimes where I think about that space is, I know how to add value on an apartment, right?
Yeah.
I renovated.
You gotta turn on your mic, Daddy. We can't hear you.
The question was, how do you add value in the commercial space, right? Because I know how to do it in the single family space, and I look at these deals, I'm like, okay, well, how do you add value?
Yeah, so we look at it almost the same way as you do in multifamily, right? In multifamily, you say, okay, hey, in 12 months, we've got X number of leases that are gonna roll over. We'll get in there, we'll fix the space up, change the cabinets, change the floor, paint the walls, and then we'll lease it for $100 a month more, or $150, or whatever that ends up being, get it closer to market, right? The nice thing about commercial real estate is that you can do the exact same strategy, right? You get in there, you buy a property that's 80% occupied at an 8% cap rate. Well, it's gonna cash flow from day one, and you've got 20% of the property that is not currently making any money. So you get in there, you institute a professional lease, right? Because the next buyer coming in is gonna wanna see a nice lease. It actually helps decrease your cap rate, which increases the value of the property. And you lease those spaces up, and then you just flip it. It's the same thing. And the nice thing about commercial real estate too is that, yeah, you can paint the exterior of the building if you think it's gonna really make a difference. But we only do the things that are going to make somebody want to sign that lease more, not necessarily something that has to be done if the tenant can do it, right? So like interior build outs, if the carpet and the walls are fine and the lighting's fine, but maybe it's 5, 10 years old, we'll still lease it as is. The tenant will come in there and pay to redo the floor or paint the walls. We don't have to. Tenant improvement allowance?
Yeah.
We will. So in commercial real estate, there's a thing called TI, tenant improvements, which is a set amount of dollars that you will give to the tenant in order to build out the space. These documents get very long because you want to make sure as the property owner that they are spending them on improvements to the building only and not their FF&E, their fixtures, furniture, and equipment. Because you want to be able to depreciate it, right? And so if you're giving them the money for that, then they're making the improvements to the building. You can do a cost segregation study and do accelerated depreciation on all those assets, and then you just run the math, right? I mean, if I'm going to give this tenant $20,000 for a 5-year lease, I want it amortized at 8%, and this is how much value I've got to add back into the lease in order to get that. Maybe it's $5 a foot. Maybe you just increase the rent by $1,000 a month to make it work. I'll get to you in a second. To make it work, and then, whoo, nice throw. To make it work, and then the subsequent increase in value based on the cap rate of the property because you signed a higher lease because you gave them some money makes it far more than worth it, right? I mean, we've done leases where we've given the tenant $20,000 or $40,000 in tenant improvements, but because we were able to get a higher lease rate based on that, the property value increased over $100,000.
So that's what we just did on the one that we bought, right? So I think we gave her like $40,000, but here's what happened was, I mean, she really renovated the whole thing. Now it looks really good. You know, if someone was coming back into that property for whatever reason, but we filled it up. I mean, that was the biggest value. You're saying the biggest value you have is if you have 20% vacancy, is to find that vacancy or fill it, right?
That's right. Yeah, or you could make some improvements to the property that when those next tenants, their leases come up, you can raise the rates.
So how do you find and how do you fill them up? Because this is the part where, I think I know the answer, but yeah. I'll let you tell me, right? Because you got to have, this is a partnership with somebody. I'm not out in the field knowing people that need space.
Right. Yeah. So in apartments, you hire a property management company, right? And they put it up on apartments.com and they kind of just sit there in the office. Sometimes they'll go hand out flyers, somewhere, right? But in commercial real estate, you do pretty much the same thing. You just hire a commercial real estate brokerage, a leasing company, to come in and manage that. And
not all brokers are the same.
Not all brokers are the same. Yeah, we're definitely going to get to that. But the way that commercial real estate brokers work is that they're paid on commissions, right? So you're not paying them to go market your property. They want your listing because it gives them the opportunity to go make money, right? And so they will put their signs up out front of the property. They'll put it on loopnet.com. They'll put it on their website. They'll start sending email blasts out to their list, which will include other brokers in the area as well as any businesses that they have ever talked to. I mean, we've got a very extensive list at this point. I think it's over 3,000 people, and only probably 400 or 500 of those are brokers. The rest are business owners that we know have actively looked for space at one point. And so whenever we list a property, we can typically get them, typically get them leased up pretty quickly. For example, that 6-bay car wash that we converted, we had 6 leases signed within 2 weeks of announcing the project because my brokerage works with a lot of restaurants. Right? And so we had those contacts already. So when we threw it out there to the paper, we didn't even have to list it on the market. We just got it announced, posted it on Instagram, and we had a lot of people reach out. And a lot of people get really upset that they weren't fast enough to sign a lease on it. And now we have a wait list of 30 restaurants for that one property. So, but there are plenty of brokerages out there that would not have been able to accomplish that at all. In fact, there were brokers that we talked to that looked at it and said, no one's going to pay this price per square foot. This is way too expensive. Well, obviously he was very wrong, but he looked at it from the wrong perspective.
Right, he was right from his perspective, but not.
Exactly.
You got to have someone that understands the vision.
Exactly. You've got to understand the property, understand the vision. Not all commercial real estate brokers are created equal. And so you can't look at it on a price per square foot basis if the all-in monthly rate is half the cost of other restaurants. And it includes all this equipment. And it's this unique property, right? And so we kind of knew what we had, so it was very easy. But there are different specialties within commercial real estate, right? You wouldn't want to hire an industrial broker to represent your retail shopping center. So the best thing to do whenever you're looking at these properties is, one, talk to the listing agent. Hey, have you been leasing this? Who has been leasing this? how successful have they been, and then go look at other comparable properties in the area and see which leasing signs are on that property. Because they're gonna be getting calls from other tenants that are looking for that space, and they're not gonna fit every single person that calls. And so these retail brokers will have a list of 30+ leads that they could immediately bring to your property to see if those vacant suites fit for their team. Gannon?
Yeah, kind of a two-part question. First part, I'm curious to hear what your capital stack looks like on your hotel deals. And secondly, how mixed-use development is working in your arena and how some of these asset classes could potentially overlap or work together.
Great question. So capital stack on our end is pretty straightforward. We're working on getting another hotel under contract that we will convert into apartments. We did one of the first motel to apartment conversions in Nashville, so we're working on our second one. That one's really interesting because it's going to be more of an affordable housing project, right? So the capital stack on affordable housing is the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. It is, you've got your equity, then you've got this grant, that grant, this funding from the city. We've actually got 30% from Amazon. They're investing into it. And then, 65% from a senior lender. I don't like working on deals like that because it just gets so complicated and you're having to juggle so much. So typically what we do, and maybe this is good or bad, I don't know, but it works for us and I'm fine with it. We typically just get senior debt and investor equity. So it's a very simple capital stack. So we typically raise anywhere from $2 to $4 million for our projects. And on the hotels right now, we're going from 50 to 65% loan to cost, which kind of sucks. But even when the market's good, you're at a 65% loan to cost for hotels anyway. So that's kind of where we're sitting. And then
you have like an 18-month, 24-month horizon for your investors?
No, it's actually a lot longer. We typically raise our capital on a 5 to 7 year timeline. Most of our projects actually get done under 3 years, but they're typically because of factors that we could not have predicted. And so I always underwrite my deals at a 5 to 7 year timeline. If it happens before that, great. But what we'll do is most of our projects are heavy value add or ground up development. So we do a 6 to 8% preferred return, which is on accrual. Is everybody familiar with the way that these deals work, like what a preferred return is?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't saying anything. So we do a 6 to 8% preferred return on accrual. And then as soon as the property starts cash flowing, we distribute that quarterly. So we catch the investors up on what's accrued, then we start the regular distributions, and we do ours pari passu after the preferred return. So we don't have any waterfalls. I don't like making it complicated. I've got a lot of doctors and professional athletes on my list. And what I have found is if you start talking IRRs or waterfalls, they are like, you're screwing me. I have no idea how, because I don't understand this math, but I'm not winning. So we just make it very easy. And it depends on the type of project. So like the 48 room boutique hotel that we're doing right now, it's a 60-40 split in favor of the LP. That is the most aggressive that we've ever done, just because we actually have to run a business there too. Most of our projects are 70-30 to 80-20 split to the LP. And then we aim for a 20% annualized cash on cash return, a 2x equity multiple over 5 years. And so sometimes we're able to hit that sooner. But especially in a market like today, I'm telling people like, hey, we're aiming for 5 years. Could be 10. I don't know. Let's just wait and see. But mixed use is great, right? A lot of I get brought in to consult national apartment developers on how to integrate retail into their developments because they don't understand it. They don't get it at all. So if you're the multifamily investor that knows how to make retail work in your favor, you'll actually have a cutting edge against national apartment groups because they don't like to focus on retail. But a lot of these cities now are requiring them to have mixed use components to their property. What they fail to see is that it's not just a requirement to just throw into your property and have. Like you should be very intentional about it because that is a revenue producing amenity, right? I mean, if you put it in the right location, Instead of having a lobby with a coffee machine, why don't you get a local coffee shop to just open up in there, pay you $500 or $1,000 a month, and they handle 100% of the coffee, right? I mean, it makes it so much easier on you. And I don't know about y'all, but when I was living in apartments, those fancy coffee machines broke every damn week. It was never working. So I can't even imagine what that property management company was having to go through getting that fixed all the time. So, I mean, it's just so much easier to have those tenants. Instead of building out a gym in your property, why not rent it out to a personal trainer? Or give it to them for free, but have them manage it. They are responsible for cleaning it. They're responsible for making sure the equipment works. And then they have to give 2 to 3 group classes for your residents every week. They love that kind of stuff. I have personal trainers tell me all the time, like, I can't afford commercial space. It's a very tough business to make any money on. But that's a huge amenity for your residents, to have a personal trainer on staff. You know, a couple of free group classes, maybe they can get some personal training sessions as well, but then that personal trainer can run everything out of there. You just got to get it, you know, the little addendum added to your insurance, but that's it. Doesn't cost you a whole lot. Now you got somebody else that's paying for it all.
One more question. What do you think has allowed you to be so successful? There are a lot of brokers, a lot of aspiring investors and developers out there who have not been able to achieve what you have. What do you think you're doing differently?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, what makes us different is that we just look at the projects differently, right? Like, there are a lot of investors and developers out there that go, you know, read a book or they go to a seminar and they learn the one way to do it. And for whatever reason, they never get creative with that strategy. And so we never wanted to do that. You know, when I started off at a boutique development firm that by the time I left had over 1,000 townhomes either under construction and permitting or in planning. We had, you know, the big retail center, we had industrial, we were doing a $100 million development up in Hendersonville. We were doing all sorts of like crazy different things. And so maybe that's what it was. Maybe my mind was just more elastic when I first got started. But what I've found is that the more creative you get, the more out of the box you get with these projects, the better they're going to be, right? I mean, we didn't stumble upon anything that has never been done before with the 6-bay car wash conversion, right? Food halls exist. But what we noticed is there was nothing that was small enough, that was cool, that was in a walkable neighborhood that gave an opportunity to these startups. And so I always look for, you know, it's nice having the brokerage, right? Because we're on the front line. I get calls every day from businesses that are looking for space. So I know exactly who is looking for everything and cannot find it. And we got calls from restaurants all the time, like, I don't want any indoor seating. Like, we just want to focus on to-go and delivery, and if people want to hang out here, cool. That's where I got the idea from. It was from people calling me saying, hey, I can't find this space. So I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go build it. You know what else I would be building right now if we could find the right space for it is flex industrial. No one is building flex industrial space. And if you're not familiar with flex, it's basically a combination of office and warehouse. So, you know, let's say it's 500 square feet of office and 1,500 square feet of warehouse, and you think of every business that could possibly occupy that, from your e-commerce startups all the way to your neighborhood plumber, right?
A real estate investing company, right? So like, I want to
Yeah.
think about like, I could have a front office
Yeah.
and a place for like order a bunch of stuff in bulk, right? And just
Yeah.
have an office space, plus I need a place for my employees.
Yeah, you got to put the stuff somewhere, right? But the thing is, with the last economic cycle, nobody has been developing that type of industrial. It's all been focused on logistics and you know, the bigger, you know, 1 million square foot Amazon facilities. And think about where flex industrial used to be. It was really close to downtown. So what is that becoming now? Everybody's tearing it down and building apartment towers. So not only do you have people not building this type of commercial real estate, the supply is going down. So, I mean, that is a huge opportunity right there in and of itself. If you find land to build flex industrial, I can all but guarantee that it will be leased before you even deliver it.
So with our car washes, we're gonna be, you know, kind of doing the McDonald's model where we buy the lots and then triple net lease them to the franchisees. So we've gotten some advice on how to structure that, but I'd love to hear if you've done any ground leasing and like what structure you would recommend for something like that.
Yeah, we've done some ground leasing. So my brokerage team represents, you know, retail groups that are, you know, mostly restaurants that are starting up. So right now we're running around with Scooter's Coffee. You know, they're doing a bunch of ground leases in Nashville right now, so we're structuring all of those. I mean, I would just structure it as an absolute net lease. Like, hey, we're delivering to you this building. Are y'all fixing up the building at all? Or you're building? Yeah, so I would do a 20-year, 15, 20-year absolute net lease and tell the tenants, we're giving you a brand new property. Here it is. And I would, you know, y'all have the expertise on car washes. I would back into it and say, hey, you know, here's what we need to charge for them to make a 15% cash on cash return or 10%, whatever is acceptable in that field. And just tell them that you know that, because it just kind of takes the wind out of their sails on the negotiation side, right? But I would do an absolute net lease. So an absolute net is an even further step where the tenant is 100% responsible for the structural components of the building, right? So in triple net, you still need to pay for the roof. You still need to pay for, you know, the floors and all that kind of stuff as the landlord. But absolute net means that you have zero responsibilities. It is literally mailbox money. You have no responsibility. The only thing that I would do is, you know, check to make sure they're paying the property taxes every year, and probably have them pay you for that, and you just handle it. So you know, they'll pay you a lump sum every month. You pay the property taxes, you pay the insurance, but they're fully responsible for everything. And a lot of these guys will tend to want a 10 to 15 year base lease with 2 to 3 5-year options, so that they can stay there. But what I would do is I would do a set rate on the rental increases for the base term. So let's just say it's going to increase 3% a year for 10 to 15 years. And then on those options, I would not agree to a rate on those options at all. Tell them we won't even consider it, and you'll have it at then market rates. That's what we put in all of our options on the leases. It will be at then market rates. Now, you'll have to do some work, both of y'all, in 15 years when that option comes due to determine what those then market rates are. But in 15 years, they could double, triple, maybe they're cut in half, but the chances of that are pretty slim, right? So you don't really have any risk. Options really only benefit the tenant. There's zero benefit in there for the landlord. So if they want options, I would structure it that way. But that's probably the best way to do it. I mean, especially if you're giving them the building.
So commercial encompasses a lot of different asset classes, right? So which ones do you like the most, I guess? Which ones would you stay away from?
Which ones would I stay away from? So self-storage right now, I know that's been the hot thing, right? And I was saying no to multifamily when that was a very controversial thing, and I was saying no to single family before that. Self-storage, I kind of look at the assets that everybody's starting to have talks on and teach people how to do. And self-storage is one of those. You know, cap rates 10 years ago were like 15 to 20%. Insane, right? Yeah, I mean, you could buy these self-storage facilities and have them pay for themselves in 5 years. Not even, right? If you're looking at just your cash-in investment. So self-storage cap rates.
I make the counter argument on that, just
Yeah.
in my mind, like, if I have low cap rates, right, that means if I make improvements, then if I make small or a decent sized improvement, my value just increased tremendously.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, so there's a yin and yang to it, in my opinion, sometimes. So I look at like, the buy part, yeah, you wanna buy it at the best cap rate you can for
Right.
sure. But like, if they're low cap rates, that means if I make dollars change, I'm gonna get rewarded a lot faster, a lot more for it.
Yeah. That's
my
absolutely.
only caveat to what you just said.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, right? I mean, if you're at a 4% cap rate and you add $100 a month, I mean, the value that adds to the property is insane. But what worries me about self-storage is that there are so many developers out there that are building new self-storage, and that hasn't historically happened before, right? I mean, in the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen more people getting into self-storage development than I've seen over the last 20. And so that's one thing that I'm concerned about with the supply-demand curve, right? There's probably going to be a lot of supply, and these guys are really going to need to fill their spaces, and so they're probably going to be willing to undercut you, which makes it tough. And then they're typically REIT funded, which means they have more cash than any of us will have, so they can take a loss for a little while if it means that they're going to get the Walmart approach, put everybody else out of business, and then all of a sudden they're the only game in town. The caveat to that, though, is if you've got an older product, you'll probably still be able to be cheaper, right? If they're having to build new construction, they're probably gonna have to come in at a higher rate. So just some things to keep in mind, right? I mean, I love self-storage. We're looking at building some self-storage. I think that that's where the value is. If you can build some self-storage right now, go do it. It's the cheapest commercial real estate to build. It costs like $70 a foot, and they will lease up pretty consistently. You can count on about 3% per month, so it takes about 3 years to stabilize that. So, I would stay away from self-storage, but I would lean into developing self-storage.
Yeah, I think it's all market dependent, right? Because
Right.
there are markets inside of markets and sub-markets. You just, in self-storage boils down to a 1 or 3 mile rate. I mean, it can be super
Right.
local. So, and I think that $70 a square foot is probably for drive up, where climate control is probably 125.
120, 130 easily, yeah.
So, and you can also have mixed use in self-storage even, which I'm seeing retail on the ground floor, some really creative stuff also. So you can always put your spin on it.
Yeah, and they're nice looking buildings. They're 3, 4, 5 stories. They're in good areas. It's a good way to get the city to typically agree to do self-storage, because they usually won't. They want it on the outskirts if it's just gonna look industrial. But I would say you could say that about really any commercial real estate type, right? I mean, a lot of people are staying away from office, but I would argue that doesn't make sense in Nashville, right? Like, yeah, I would stay away from office in San Francisco. That is the worst market in the world that you could possibly be buying office in. But Nashville, I mean, our office assets keep leasing up, and we keep raising rates, and they're doing fine. Now, I wouldn't buy a Class A tower downtown. I'd probably buy a Class B, 3-story office building in the suburbs. Those are doing really well. Retail, I wouldn't look at any like power centers right now. You're probably going to end up having some vacancy, and unless you can get really creative on getting that filled, it's going to be a problem. But neighborhood strip centers, absolutely. Absolutely, I would buy those all day, because they tend to offer the services and products that people want that day. They don't want to wait for Amazon to bring it, or maybe it's something that they need to touch and feel, or maybe it's a dry cleaners, right? Like, you can't really just ship that off to Amazon. And on the industrial side, I would just look at building. I mean, cap rates are so low in that space. It's really wild to see like what has happened in industrial over the last 10 years, because it used to be the unsexy side of real estate that no one really cared to touch. And, I remember flex space back then was like $5, $6 a foot. And now it's 18, 20. It's what retail prices were 10 years ago, which is kind of hard to believe, but hey, inflation, right? So, any final questions? I think I've got 1 minute, so we might have time for one more.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
What's your experience when you're, so I'm married to a visionary who sees things that a lot of people don't see in other buildings, but like rezoning, reclassification, like working with the cities or whoever, like what's your experience like with that? Because I know that can sometimes be a really big problem. Probably depends on the city, but.
Yeah, it really depends on the city. Whenever we're looking at rezoning a property, like we just put, I guess last year we put 2.5 acres under contract in East Nashville, and we are coming up on finalizing the rezoning process. It took a lot of conversations with our council member, we had probably had 2 or 3 neighborhood meetings, and then we had to go lobby with the Nashville Department of Transportation because they wanted an alley, and we didn't want an alley, the neighbors didn't want an alley. Metro won, they got an alley. So it's a lot of conversations. What I would say is don't buy the property unless it works without the rezoning. If you plan on rezoning a property, put it under contract, work with the seller and say, hey, look, you want this price? I can only give you this price if I get it rezoned. So we'll put it under contract and we'll do all the work on that. And usually, especially in a market like today, sellers are probably willing to do that because there's not going to be a whole lot of other people coming in and offering them close to what their asking price is. So I'm happy to talk to you more about that offline.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
All right.
So there you have it. A little talk that I did with Investor Fuel while they were here in Nashville. The biggest takeaways that I want you to walk away from this video with are that commercial real estate is not actually that difficult. If you're able to underwrite multifamily and single family deals, commercial real estate is just as difficult, if not more simple than those. And the biggest barrier is just the education. Fortunately, on this YouTube channel, we've got a whole bunch of content on how you can learn about commercial real estate investing so that you can get out there and do it yourself. So check out Investor Fuel, go check out their masterminds. I'm a big fan of masterminds because that is how I got my start. That's how I learned how to syndicate commercial real estate and how I learned to invest in commercial real estate and met partners there. I met investors there. So we'll see you guys next time.